Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hud Grad Club podcast. And Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And if we've got any kind of viewers or listeners who perhaps not come across you before in their time at the university, can you tell us a little bit more about your background, what you studied at Huddersfield and what you're up to now?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2015 from Huddersfield, studying music technology. And had a really good time there. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but really enjoyed my time. And I enjoyed Huddersfield so much I stuck around, so I am still in Huddersfield, but doing something very different. No longer working in music or music tech, but I actually work on a freelance basis in the world of football shirts. So again, very different transition from uni, but yeah, working in different areas, so design, content creation, marketing, even a bit of presenting, so kind of various strands in the football shirt world. But yeah, that's a brief summary. I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, a brilliant potted introduction. I know we're going to kind of pull at some of those strands throughout the podcast in terms of what you're up to now and sort of how you got to there from the music tech degree. But we start every episode, as always, with our greatest Hud story ever told section. So this is very much about giving you a chance to reflect on your time at the university and some of the special memories from your time then. So I guess kind of first of all, what sort of brought you to the University of Huddersfield? You mentioned you stuck around, but what kind of got you there in the first place?
Yeah, so when I was looking for unis as a student at college or sixth form, I knew I wanted to do music technology, and I kind of basically just looked online on forums, different places, trying to find what the better unis were for music tech in the country. And I was growing up in Essex, so quite far away from here, but I basically just kind of kept my my catchment area pretty wide, if you like. And Huddersfield was one of those unis which kept coming back. People kept saying it was good. It was like good balance of, on a practical level, the grades to get in weren't too astronomically high. My grades weren't amazing at college, so it was sort of achievable there in terms of getting in. But the quality was excellent. The standard of teaching and stuff was first class. So yeah, and I came to it for an open day again. Just got a really good feeling about it. So yeah, came to Huddersfield. I don't think anyone else in my college went above Birmingham, everyone stayed down south. But it was a big change, people joke about the difference between the south and the north of England. I definitely felt a bit of that, but in a good sense. Like I enjoyed getting away from fairly near London where I was, coming up north. It felt a little bit more to to kind of my personality, if you like, more laid back perhaps. But yeah, really enjoyed Huddersfield, and as I say, now I'm living here and no plans to move, so that's good.
And I guess, as you say, even stereotypes have a kernel of truth to them, don't they, around the difference between the north and south. We won't say any more than that on the podcast. No. And tell us, are there any sort of special memories, I guess, or particular memories of your time at the university that you'd like to share?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was funny when I was thinking about some memories. It was often some of the stuff maybe outside the course itself, which really stood out. And I think, as I'm sure many people say, one of the best things about uni is just a chance to make new friends, meet new people, have experiences and things you wouldn't maybe perhaps have otherwise. And I was reminded of a holiday I took just after my first year. And a good friend of mine, Seb Lehman, who was from Bavaria, from Germany, and he invited a few of us over to Germany, and it was just great to kind of again have those kind of things, which again, going to uni, I didn't know anyone, I was in a completely new place, completely new part of England. And you make some of these friends and you form really good friendships. And that was just a great time, and kind of stuff like that spurs you on for your course. You sort of think, okay, I'm enjoying this, but this just, it kind of makes it a little bit better. So I was reminded of that holiday again to Germany, and there was a few other trips I'd taken friends. And again, it's the kind of thing which I think just in those years when you're moving away from home, it's so important to have those kind of relationships, because it makes a big difference, of course. And looking back, it really, I think, shaped as well the person I am today, giving me confidence just in myself and in what I'm doing. So there's lots I could pick out, but that holiday was fun.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think really important to kind of mention about the holistic experience of university. You're right. I think, so often, particularly kind of in modern discourse now, a lot of the stuff where we talk about universities around, things like employment outcomes and about, sort of, I guess, what the degree does for you in the sense of your kind of career. But actually, really important to kind of bear in mind, as you said, that the more holistic kind of elements of it, the experiences you have, the opportunities you have to meet different people from different backgrounds, and kind of what that does and how that sort of enriches your life. So great to hear. Really, really brilliant experience. And I know we're also going to be kind of pulling on that international thread a little bit more sort of moving forward. So we're going to come back to that. So that's been a really nice start to kind of kick off the podcast. And I guess a really good time also now to move on to talk a little bit more about, your transition from the university to sort of where you are now. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, it's not kind of been a linear journey from the music technology degree, indeed, to doing something quite different now. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that transition was like initially, I guess, from finishing the degree to becoming a graduate, and, how has that sort of led to where you are now?
It's a really, as I say, unusual story. And I think sometimes kind of, it's only when I stop and reflect on moments like this that I realize how strange it is. Although I say that, I think these days it's more and more common. But anyway, when I finished uni, I had a really good time. I enjoyed my degree. I think my final year was probably my favorite year of the degree. I think it was just lots of stuff clicked, and I got a first. I was really thrilled with that. But I realized, even during my degree, actually, that, I was looking around a lot of my peers, and I realized that a lot of the people I was with, they were just a bit more kind of sold out for music tech. They were getting jobs in the industry, maybe even during the degree, doing kind of a lot of stuff on top of the degree. And I had that kind of imposter syndrome, even as a student, kind of thinking, I'm doing this degree, but I don't actually think I'm maybe cut out, or at least, when I look at the competition, I don't think I'm quite there for getting a job in the field. And music tech is one of those industries which is really hard to get a job in. There's only so many jobs, at least in the kind of classic, kind of traditional sense, at studios or working with, film or TV and that sort of thing. It's competitive and what have you. So anyway, as I graduated, there was a lot of uncertainty. I didn't have anything lined up. And even though I'd done a placement year, and I'll talk about that in a bit, I'm sure, but there wasn't anything off the back of that in terms of the job. So it was honestly not an easy kind of few months following graduation, because again, there was nothing lined up, and I ended up moving back home to Essex. But I was still kind of quite keen to come back to Huddersfield. I had still a lot of friends here. I was quite connected to a church here, and I'd sort of put down a lot of roots in Huddersfield. So having to go back to Essex was a bit of a blow. But anyway, as I was applying for jobs, I kind of basically said, right, I'm gonna apply for stuff both down south and up north. And again, my heart was still here in Huddersfield, but the reality was there were a lot of jobs, say, in London, and on paper it would have been easier to get a job down south and maybe live from home and kind of save money that way. But anyway, applying for jobs, I ended up about 6 months after graduating. I did get an interview at a place in Manchester, and this wasn't in a field to do with anything to do with music. It was actually in marketing. And the kind of, again, to try not to take too much time, but to be brief about how I got to that point, in my placement year, my third year, I worked at a creative media agency. So there was a lot of music involved in that. There was a small studio which I worked in, but it was actually a lot of the kind of non-music stuff, which I really enjoyed. There was a lot of stuff to do with marketing, social media, graphic design. We even had us doing a bit of sales. There was all sorts of things I was exposed to, but it was quite good looking back now. That placement really helped me. It helped me in my degree, but it also helped me to kind of realize a lot of these skills I was learning were transferable into other industries. So it meant that when I was applying for jobs, even though I wasn't able to get anything related to my degree, I was able to get a marketing job. And it was one of those where, even though, again, there wasn't many obvious threads, actually, when I started working, you realize that, you're in a team meeting or you're working with your team. The skills you picked up in your degree are helping here, and it's funny, the job was at a health and safety software company. So again, nothing too easy. I can't pretend, I was writing blogs for this company. I can't pretend to have any passion for it. But yeah, looking back, uni did really help me prepare for that. And I think, the other thing which I realized as well, which is kind of funny, as soon as you get into an office and you're chatting to people, you're meeting people, you realize, some people, they didn't even go to uni. Some people went to uni, they did something completely different. Others, sure, they went to uni, got the degree, went into the industry. You've got such a variety. And I think you realize very quickly that, what you kind of do in your education and all that part of your life doesn't set you on a definitive path. You can make the most of, if you go to uni, you can make the most of that, or actually you could not make the most of that. And similarly, if you don't go to uni, it doesn't mean you're not going to get, all the best opportunities in life. Actually, sure, some doors might open or close, but I think it made me realize very quickly how basically, in some ways, you're starting from square one again, or at least maybe to put it in a more positive light, you've got a fresh slate, you've got an opportunity. So anyway, that's a long winded way of saying I basically ended up in marketing. And that was the first step in my career.
That's great. And I mean, no, I think, you're absolutely right to say that sometimes there is this sort of temptation, I guess, to imagine that you have this kind of definitive linear pathway set out for you. You particularly, with maybe some degrees that are perhaps seen as being more vocational, having kind of a clearer pathway to some form of outcome at the end. So I think, to challenge that, as you say, is really important, and work. You're absolutely right to say it can be quite a great leveler when you're starting to meet people who've come from those sort of different work backgrounds or academic backgrounds, and seeing that actually, inevitably you're all going to be part of projects and kind of, interacting and sort of participating in different ways. And I guess, you mentioned there about, I suppose sort of having a path that maybe, or a clean slate applies particularly, I suppose, to your career journey, because you've ended up in a sector that I guess isn't even a sector. It's kind of its own thing, really. So tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing at the moment, I guess, with football shirts, and how did you sort of get into all of that originally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a degree in football shirts at the moment. If there is, I'd like to go back to uni, I think. But no, it's a cliche, I guess. But I've ended up basically doing what I love, or doing my hobby as a job, really. And it kind of all came about when I was at this marketing job in Manchester. I was, after a few years, I was kind of ready for a change of scenery. And kind of since getting that job, I picked up a hobby, basically just because I had disposable income, collecting football shirts. And it was something which I kind of enjoyed. And it was something which, it's a simple thing, but I just enjoy kind of browsing eBay. You could get kind of, really kind of good bargains and these great shirts, which again, kind of growing up, I always enjoyed sport. Not so much playing, because I wasn't very good at actually playing football or playing sport, but I really enjoyed the kind of the visuals, the branding, the history, the geography, all that stuff you get with sport. And kits are a big part of that, of course. So anyway, I had this hobby, and when I was looking for jobs, a colleague of mine basically just passed on a job listing at a football price comparison site. So it's a funny kind of niche, but basically this company, you had a price comparison site for kits and boots and that sort of stuff. And they were actually looking for someone who was basically really interested in shirts to, again, write blogs and kind of manage the kind of content marketing side of things for them. And it was one of those things where I thought, well, hang on a minute, this is, well, it was a real opportunity, because I had this hobby. And as part of that, I'd been very much kind of enjoying being part of the online community. And I think, like many of us, we all have, of course, different spaces we're in, whether it's on Twitter or Reddit or Facebook, wherever it is. And I've been, again, quite active on Twitter, and this was still a very niche community, but when I went to the interview, it was great because I basically just talked, chewed their ears off about how much I love shirts. And like, this is great. This is what we want. And what was really cool about that particular job, and this was still in Manchester, but I was able to basically combine my work for this company whilst also building a kind of personal brand. And it was mutually beneficial. For me, of course, it meant that I could gain a bit of a following. I could get a few more bits of work outside of my job, but it really benefited the company as well, because as I was, again, spending more time talking about shirts, it helped them. I was able to kind of, it was one of those things where they were actually really understanding of that. I think they were quite, what was great about that is, again, they were quite, they realized the benefit of that. And anyway, kind of through all of that, it got to the point where, again, after a couple of years there, I had enough contacts in the industry, and also the community had kind of grown a bit steadily over those couple of years, that I could go freelance. So it was, in a couple of years, a lot changed very quickly. But it's funny because looking back, I guess, the timing was excellent, because it sounds really funny to say and a bit odd to say, but when everything was starting to happen with the pandemic, I was already ready to transition to being freelance and working from home. And I it was it the January of that year when I'd already handed in my notice and was ready to be again to be freelance. And it meant that I was able to still work, and strangely, when the pandemic hit, again, lots of people, well, everyone was at home. Lots of people started kind of basically going into their attics and finding all these old shirts, and I realized, and suddenly there was so much more work, and just more people were interested in shirts. So the community has really grown around shirts in the last couple of years. And because I was basically just early enough, one of the first group of people, it means that now I can sustain it full time, at least for the time being. So yeah, that was kind of how it happened, and it was a bit unusual, but it did happen.
And I believe you've had sort of something that's happened, I guess, slightly more recently, which has helped to kind of kick the brand up even more so. So tell us a little bit about this kind of recent story that came through Instagram, and I know has been getting a little bit of airtime with the alumni team at Huddersfield as well.
Yeah, it's been a career highlight for sure. Basically, last year, I entered a competition, an open competition, to design a shirt for a team called Red Star FC, and they're a French team, a French club, a professional club in the third tier of French football, but they've got a bit of a cult following. And I basically applied on a whim. I've been for quite a few years now working in this industry, but I've not really stepped into design. But it was always a long-term aspiration of mine. I think, it was kind of an idea that maybe after several years I could get into it. So I applied basically just for fun. But amazingly, I made it into the final 5 or the final shortlist. And then it was a public vote. And I guess, in some way, well, I was able to leverage the audience I had, and unashamedly, really kind of try and get some votes. But I ended up winning the competition anyway. And that whole experience has been amazing. I actually got to go to Paris with my wife, and we got to see the team play the game in the shirt. They even had us in the dressing room after full time, and then they won the game, so they're really excited. But for me, it was just quite surreal seeing a design that I'd made in the flesh. The moment which really struck me was when we were just before the game, we were just milling around the club shop, and there were some fans coming in and they were buying the shirt, and it was all just really, really surreal. It's like, again, this is just a hobby of mine. And that was like a kind of, a moment which really just, I'll never forget that. And what's been really cool is I've been able to kind of, off the back of that, basically put out some feelers, looking for some more design work, because I think now I'd like to push more into that field. And even just in the last couple of weeks, I've had, again, a couple of bits of work agreed for this coming year with a few smaller companies, but it's kind of a foot in the door. But yeah, I mean, I've actually got the shirt as well. If you want
let's see it. Let's get it out on the podcast.
Yeah,
only if you're watching, obviously, and not listening. But yeah,
yeah. So I mean, it's anyone who has seen anything to do with what I'm doing would have seen this. I've not stopped talking about this since it came out. This is the shirt. Lots of really kind of fun little nods to the club's history. So this was actually the 125th anniversary shirt of the club. So they're an old club. But yeah, it was just, a really fun project. The team at the club, and also Kappa, who are the manufacturers, they were just so great throughout the process. And it was really cool. This shirt was like made available to buy again from the club shop and various places. And it's one of those where now kind of this is kind of hopefully the first of many. But even if this is how I kind of bow out in my design career, I'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, you even if you go out on a high, that's a pretty big high. So that's great. What an amazing experience. I mean, you mentioned there already that very much kind of a career highlight. I guess before we sort of move on to talk a bit about your kind of careers advice or underrated careers advice, are there any other sort of light bulb moments, other career highlights you'd like to share on the podcast, or I guess any particular people who've been, I guess, especially sort of helpful in your career you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah. When I was thinking about this, there was one person actually who stood out, and it was a guy called Kevin Wiltshire. And what's really funny is I only overlapped with Kevin for a few months, so it wasn't a long time. But this was when I was in my first job in Manchester, my marketing job. And Kevin was a guy, he came in and he had a lot of experience, but it was the way that we'd have a lot of conversations just, as we were in the office. And he really helped me to kind of see the kind of value in the skills I was learning being applicable for all sorts of things. And actually it was very much the kind of your attitude applying those skills, which was more valuable than perhaps the skills themselves or the qualifications themselves, because I think I was in that role in Manchester. And, the job was going okay, but I felt a little bit kind of disillusioned thinking, what am I doing this for? This isn't an industry I want to be in. And again, Kevin was just really great in kind of helping me to see, actually, you basically, you don't know what's going to happen. And actually the skills you're learning now, you can apply those to different industries. And just because you're not maybe building up, years in a certain industry doesn't mean you can't transition. Try and kind of have an open mind with that. And again, think about, again, it sounds kind of funny perhaps, but your attitude each day to work, how you're working with other people, how you're actually being, a good colleague to work with in your job. All these things are just as valuable as a piece of paper. And he really helped kind of solidify that. And again, even just in a few months when I was working with him. So shout out to Kevin. But there's been others as well. I mean, I could mention my boss, my football price comparison site job, Aisha. Again, really, really good boss to work for. She was, again, she understood the kind of value in people and having the right people. And actually that's more valuable sometimes. Then kind of just, if you just look at kind of the numbers, say, of a campaign or something, so that's not going very well. But if you've got the right team, you can ride through that and actually do great things. And again, the team that we had with Aisha was excellent, and that really helped me professionally as well. So a couple of people there, but I think just in general, it's there's a lot to say, but I think the biggest thing for me has just been learning kind of to take a step back sometimes. In the moment, stuff can be a bit hard to kind of, you can't see the wood from the trees, but there's, often, it's just about kind of, I guess, having an open mind, taking it one step at a time, and stuff will happen.
Yeah, and I think that links quite nicely to your sort of underrated careers advice you're gonna finish with today, I believe, which I guess is kind of linked to everything you've been saying there about that sort of open-mindedness and flexibility. So what sort of nuggets of wisdom would you like to share as part of the underrated careers advice section?
Yeah, I mean, we've hinted at it, I guess, already, but it's just to say that, most career paths aren't linear these days. And I think, it does happen sometimes. Maybe you're doing a degree and it is quite linear. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think, it's important to say that most of the time there'll be a lot of twists and turns. Sometimes, you might be in a job and it feels like a bit of a dead end job. It feels like this isn't leading to anything. and that's okay. I guess maybe as a broader point, your value isn't found in your job. I think that's important to say. It's not. Some people, I think, they feel like if they're in a good job, that means they're doing well in life, and in a sense you might be, but actually there's more important things. I think and actually it's about, again, your attitude whilst you're there. Making the most of a situation, realizing that actually, you don't know in 5 years' time. It's funny in interviews, people ask you, don't they, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? and it's a funny question because, none of us know where we're going to be in 5 years' time. I mean, in many ways, we might make plans, but they could change overnight. And that's not to say it's good to make plans, it's good to make goals. But I think for me, the more and more I've gone through my career, the more I've realized that actually a goal is one thing, but it's more about thinking, okay, how am I going to tackle this day ahead of me, this week ahead of me? What are some of the things I'm going to be doing to make the most of the situation? And maybe that won't mean immediate success. Maybe it won't be immediately gratifying, but actually the skills you pick up along the way, the things you learn, the people you meet, they will all play a part in the bigger picture. So there's a lot of cliches thrown in there.
We don't mind.
Something useful.
We're okay with having cliches. I mean, I think it's genuinely is a really important point, because I think we like to have order, or imagine, I guess there's a sense of order, don't we, in the world, and that sort of things. But as you say, great plans often don't survive first contact with reality, and COVID's a really good example of that. But also, as you say, there are other things that give you value in life, and you're a great example of someone who was involved in something that you got involved in because you care about it and you're passionate about it, and as you said, probably would never have foreseen that being something that you could monetize or make money from or have success from, and yet those things have happened. So I think that's great advice for current students and early career graduates alike, in terms of not just kind of staying the course, as you said, but also sort of being open-minded to when things can change, being comfortable with the fact that life can be chaotic, and being prepared, I guess, to take those opportunities when they come. So careers professionals who are fans of chaos theory of careers will love that. They will be a big fan of that. Very niche reference, but
nice.
Great reflections. And again, Phil, thanks so much for sort of sharing your career journey. If we've had students or graduates or anyone who's been interested while listening to the podcast, who might want to kind of check out your work or get in touch with you moving forward, where's the best place to find you?
I'm on various platforms, Twitter as well, most active. I'm just there on my name, Phil Delves. Instagram as well, on LinkedIn. I've got a presence, even though I'm not very active. I've got a small YouTube channel as well called Phil's Corner. But head to Twitter. My DMs are open. Always happy to chat. And actually, it's funny because in the last couple of years, there's been a few people, actually, uni students around the country, who have been doing different degrees to do with business and sports. And it's been quite surreal. People have been asking me, can I speak to you about, I'm doing a project about football shirts, can I speak to you? So if you're out there and you're doing something about, something related to football shirts, I'd love to help out, give a bit of time to chat, because I think it's important that we all give back, of course. So do reach out.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant offer, Phil. Thanks. But we'll obviously ping up on the screen all of the details about your kind of Twitter, Instagram, the YouTube channel, everything. But fantastic offer if you're operating in that field or doing research in that field. And as you said, one of the advantages of being in quite a niche sort of area is, you've very much got that community and expertise that you can draw on, and it sounds like a really good community to be part of. So, Phil, thanks so much for giving up your time to join us, being our latest member of the Hud Grad Club, and obviously we wish you all the best with everything moving forward.
Thanks, Chris, and same to you and the same.
Take care, all the best, bye-bye.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.